Hello my friends, it is Aimee Esther here, and today I wanted to share with you my Hashimoto's story. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I have several chronic illnesses, one of them being Hashimoto's, which is my newest chronic illness that I have been diagnosed with. And this one has been a part of my life for many years. I have been tested for it and was told I didn't have it. We're gonna get into that whole story today. But if you want to hear about my other chronic illnesses, POTS, SIBO, endometriosis, PCOS, all of those things, I have links below in the description. You can read about them or head over to my channel. I have a video on each of my chronic illnesses and my story with those, and more videos to come about what to do about those things, more info about the chronic illnesses, and just how to do life with chronic illness. So if you haven't been here before, make sure you subscribe because you're not going to want to miss any of those videos, especially if you have Hashimoto's, because I am just getting my diagnosis, so I'm just learning, and there are going to be tons and tons of videos coming up on my channel about this disease. So I would love to see you around here again. But today we are just talking about Hashimoto's disease. So I wanted to share with you my story. If you have been here before, you may know some of my story. It is long, and I do want to do a video from just start to finish of all my chronic illnesses, how they started, all of that stuff. So stay tuned for a video on that in the future. But today I just wanted to share the part about Hashimoto's. So let's start with what Hashimoto's actually is. So Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disorder, meaning it's where your immune system attacks the healthy parts of your body. So Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disorder of the thyroid. So it is part of the endocrine system, which means it deals with hormones, and it can affect every part of your body. If you have not seen my video on my symptoms, I'll link it down below, and I list all the symptoms that I feel every single day. There's a lot of them, and they are seriously all over my body. From my head to my toes, I feel symptoms. And Hashimoto's affects all of those parts of my body. And even though I have other chronic illnesses, Hashimoto's affects those chronic illnesses, and it affects really everywhere. So I want to share with you the symptoms. These are just from Google, and then throughout the rest of my story that you're going to hear, you'll hear my symptoms with Hashimoto's. So with Hashimoto's, Google tells us that the symptoms are fatigue, sensitivity to cold, constipation, pale dry skin, puffy face, brittle nails, hair loss, enlarged tongue, weight gain, muscle aches and tenderness, stiffness and joint pain, muscle weakness, excessive or prolonged menstrual bleeding, depression, and brain fog. And I have almost all of those symptoms. So those are the common symptoms that people who have Hashimoto's usually face. And like I mentioned before, a lot of the time, if you have Hashimoto's, you have other chronic illnesses or other autoimmune diseases that are also affecting your body. And so you might have a lot more symptoms than just those listed. So let's talk about my story. So going back, I started my chronic illness journey with some stomach issues. I just had some stomach pain, bloating, those types of stuff. All the stomach things, actually. And then as time went on, I started to get really fatigued to the point where it was really hard for me to get out of bed. And one of my most severe symptoms since my chronic illnesses have started is muscle aches. So just like every muscle in my body, particularly in my legs, would just ache. And I wouldn't even, honestly, I call it more a pain rather than an ache because it hurts so bad. It's more than just like you have exercise and you just feel a little achy. It is just like an intense pain that's hard to get out of bed. So that was one of my first symptoms, and I'm not going to go through all of my symptoms. Like I said, I have a video on that, and it would take way too long to share them in every video, so you can go watch that. But those were kind of how my things started. So I started going to doctors, and if you have Hashimoto's, you may know that it's very hard to get a correct diagnosis of Hashimoto's. So I would go to doctors. I first started with some GI doctors. They did stomach scopes, colonoscopies, CT scans, and everything came back normal. Finally, after months of that, I got diagnosed with SIBO, a small intestine bacterial overgrowth. I tried to treat that. It would not die. It just stayed there. I tried everything you could think of to treat my SIBO, and I just could not kill it. So we thought something else must be going on, and SIBO does not cause the fatigue and the muscle aches that I was having, as well as, brain fog and all these other symptoms that I was having. And so we decided to go get my endometriosis removed because I've always known I had that. We got that removed. It didn't do anything for my fatigue or my stomach problems, but I was able to get diagnosed with endometriosis and PCOS at that time. So now we are on 3 diagnoses that none of them covered my symptoms that were debilitating. Like, of course, it helped some of my symptoms, like my intense menstrual cramps helped a little bit. Finding out that I had endometriosis, getting that removed, and finding out I had SIBO, at least I kind of knew what to do, but I still was just not finding relief. So we knew something else bigger was going on. So I went to neurologists, I went to endocrinologists, I went to GI doctors, internists, OBGYNs. I just went to every doctor you can think of. I even went to natural doctors. I tried, the homeopathic route. Nothing was solving my problems. So during this time of going to who knows how many doctors, so many doctors, I had a lot of blood work done, so much blood work. And I had multiple doctors mention Hashimoto's to me, and as well as just a general autoimmune disorder. So I had many doctors tell me that my symptoms sounded like an autoimmune disorder, and it really aligned with Hashimoto's. So I was tested probably 2 or 3 times for Hashimoto's disease, and it just kept coming back normal. I would occasionally have, my T3 was a little off, or my TSH was a little off. Some of my thyroid hormones were a little bit off, but I never got a positive antibodies test, and I never got really anything more than just like your levels of your thyroid are a little bit off. So take this supplement or whatever. So even though I had doctors mention Hashimoto's to me, they just trusted the test. I trusted the test that they were just coming back with the right results. So finally, after years of trying to figure out what was wrong with me, I ended up giving up, and I just decided to live with it. So for about a year, I decided to live with it. I ended up getting pregnant. I miscarried that baby. And then because I had PCOS, I went on an ovulation drug, got pregnant again, and I actually miscarried that baby. Then I got pregnant a 3rd time on Clomid, and that baby I have with me today. She is now a little over a year old. So I have my miracle baby. When I was about 6 months pregnant, I found out that I had POTS, and I have a video of my POTS story. How I found out, all that stuff is linked down below. So I found out I had POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which means when I stand, my blood pools at my feet. My blood vessels do not constrict to move my blood up. So I started wearing some really tight compression socks, and I saw a night and day difference. I had so much more energy. My muscle aches were better. They weren't gone, but they were so much better. I was able to exercise, which helped my muscle aches and my fatigue, and I just was doing so much better wearing these socks. So I figured that POTS was the cause of all of my many symptoms and the reason that I had these other several chronic illnesses, and I just started treating my POTS, and I started to feel so much better. If you want to know what I do to treat my POTS, I also have a video on that, my POTS treatment, so you can head over there and look at that video as well. But as I was treating my POTS, I felt better. I had my daughter, and I felt a million times better after I gave birth to her. I was just doing really good. However, I was still living with all these symptoms, and I started talking to people who had POTS. And we talked about our symptoms, and everyone I talked to would say, yes, I get fatigued and I get dizzy, and they talk about all the common POTS symptoms. And I always would mention, yeah, and I have these severe muscle aches and pains. So do you get those too? And almost everyone I talked to said, no, I've never gotten that. So I assumed that maybe my symptoms were just a little bit different than everyone else. And I talked to a lot of people with POTS, you guys, so many. I had a Facebook group with all my POTS friends, and there was thousands of people in there, and nobody seemed to have that symptom with me. So that was a little confusing, that why, I had a couple of these extra symptoms. That was my main one. There were a few others, but that was my main one that just didn't line up with POTS. But I just figured that my body was different, that maybe they were explaining it different. Maybe their fatigue doesn't feel as painful as me. I don't know. I was just a little confused. So then, fast forward to just a few days ago, my dad really wanted me to get a full body scan. Now, I had so many scans and ultrasounds and CT scans and laparoscopic surgeries, so many things, and everything always comes back normal. And so I just thought, this is a waste of money. I don't want to do this. But my dad really wanted me to do this scan. So I said, okay, fine, one scan. Just don't be mad if it comes back totally normal and it's a waste of money. So I went in and I showed her all of my chronic illnesses that I had. And she said to her colleague before we started, I'm so curious to see if there are calcium deposits. And I wasn't really paying attention, didn't know if they were talking about me, but they started my scan and they started from the neck and went down. And as soon as she put that on my thyroid, we saw a bunch of different, said they were calcium deposits, a bunch of different spots all over my thyroid. And she showed me both sides, and one side only had a couple spots and the other one was just covered all over. And she said, this is a very clear sign of Hashimoto's. Have you ever heard of that? And I said, yes. You know, I've had doctors talk to me, but I was tested and it was negative. And she told me how the test is really hard to get, that one day you might get a positive, the next day it would be negative. Unless you're having like a super flare up, you might not get a positive. And that it is very hard to get a positive test for Hashimoto's. And I had no idea about this. I know, of course, that false negatives can happen, but I just trusted all the doctors I had, and I didn't think that would happen to me. And so I talked to her a little bit about it, and she said, this isn't 100% sure that it's Hashimoto's, so let me look at some other things. Let's talk more about your symptoms. And she started to ask me oh, do you have trouble sleeping? And I said, yes. It is so hard for me to fall asleep at night, and if I get woken up, I just can't fall back asleep. And she said, okay, do you get random anxiety attacks or depression? And I said, yes, just I'll be totally normal and fine, I'm feeling great. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I just have this crazy anxiety attack, and it will just come out of nowhere. And she said, those are signs of Hashimoto's. And she talked about a few other things that were signs, and I said, yes, I have that and that and that. And it explained a lot of my symptoms that weren't covered by my other chronic illnesses, particularly my muscle aches. That's a big symptom with Hashimoto's, and it was not part of my POTS. No one else that I knew that had POTS had that, of course, unless they had Hashimoto's. I'm sure that they also had that symptom. But it was kind of a relief to know that that was kind of the core of all my chronic illnesses. And I really thought POTS was my core, that my blood not circulating was the core. But we think it's actually my Hashimoto's now. And the reason that I was feeling so much better with treating my POTS is because, one, they are connected. It is my body, one body. I treat one of my chronic illnesses, and it definitely will help all the other ones. But also, it was getting my blood flowing, and that was not happening because of my POTS. My veins didn't constrict, and so I think that's why I was feeling so much better. And then I was able to exercise, I was able to eat better, and all those things because I was treating my POTS, and that all helped my Hashimoto's symptoms. But now that I know that I have Hashimoto's, I have a much better idea of what to do, because I know for sure I have an autoimmune disease. I have been thinking that I had an autoimmune disease for years now. I thought maybe my POTS was autoimmune because of just all the symptoms I have that just connect to autoimmune disease. So it makes a lot of sense that I do have Hashimoto's. It's unfortunate that it took me so long to figure this out, because I actually had a miscarriage about a month ago. If you've been on my channel before, you know this, or if you follow me on Instagram, which head over there, especially if I have Hashimoto's. I post a lot about all my chronic illnesses, all the things like that. But I unfortunately had a miscarriage about a month ago, and then I find out now that it is because of my Hashimoto's, because Hashimoto's does cause recurrent miscarriages, and so that's really unfortunate, because I also have some severe infertility with my PCOS and endometriosis. So that is not good news, but I do believe that everything happens for a reason, and there's a reason that I didn't know about this Hashimoto's disease before. Maybe I wouldn't have found out about my POTS and some of my other chronic illnesses. I would have just blamed it all on Hashimoto's. I don't know why it took me so long to figure this out, but I do know that everything happens for a reason. So if you have Hashimoto's, I would love to connect with you, especially because I am brand new to this disease. Okay, well, I've had it for a while, but I'm brand new to my knowledge about this disease. I researched it back a few years ago when I thought I had it, but I'm just getting even more information and learning all the things. So please, it would be so helpful if you would leave any tips and tricks you have for people with Hashimoto's. Tell me what your symptoms are. I just want to connect with you, because I want to learn everything there is to know about Hashimoto's. So comment below or head over to my Instagram and send me a direct message so that we can chat about Hashimoto's. I hope this video is helpful for you. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, if you also have Hashimoto's, and please subscribe to my channel, because we want to build this community of chronic illness friends and warriors as we go through this life together. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.